Welcome back to The Line. Experts say stable housing is very important to child well-being. Programs that address housing needs help eliminate risks to children's health, safety, and reduce child abuse, and probably more importantly, keep children out of the foster care system. One such program is detailed in an in-depth article written by Lauren Villagran for Searchlight New Mexico. And according to the article, Keeping Families Together, or KFT, came about through New Mexico Appleseed. KFT is a pilot project. It stands to end, however, in June, and its future is uncertain. And Diane, when KFT ends, some 44 families will be dropped. But it looks like this is having some progress. This helps families. As a basic idea, does this hit you as a proper way to go here? Because when you keep everyone intact, you've got a better chance to keep a family intact.
I agree with that concept totally. I think that the family support system is crucial. And I think that when you have everybody on the same, if you've got a good family, now there are some situations that are totally different, if we've seen in the news recently, but I think the program sounds marvelous. I'm very, very concerned, and we do this too often. We start programs, they're good, and then we don't fund them.
That's a classic here, yes.
That's a classic in New Mexico.
That's right.
And I'm not exactly sure who funded this program. Do any of y'all know? But
the feds.
The feds.
Actually, yes.
Okay, then, well, I can understand they're doing a lot of cutting at the federal level.
That's right. That's right.
But if this is so good, which it appears to be, then the state ought to be stepping in. And because a lot of times that will happen. The feds will give you money for a pilot project and then say if you wish to continue it, it has to be funded at the state level. But I'm also thinking for something this good, there must be grants. There are large major foundations.
That's right.
The Robert Wood Johnson, for example. There are a number of different national grant programs that I think it's worth somebody trying.
That's right.
And I don't know who's in charge.
That's right. Well, it's New Mexico Appleseed, and we have to give them a little bit of credit here. They actually pulled this together, Laura, when you think about, the idea of pushing something like this forward. And now, there are some problems they have found out, and some of the problems include getting some of these families into homes, or apartments, I should say, they will never be able to afford because there's a lack of that kind of housing, but they want to get folks into it. That's a bad situation to have something, a roof over your head finally for the first time in a lot of years, and then it just goes away because you can't afford it. So we have some work to do with this, but your overall sense of the program, are you supportive as you see it?
Well, yes. I mean, I think it looks like a new approach to addressing this issue, targeted at the most vulnerable, it seems, and certainly the intersection between the homelessness and child abuse. We've seen a lot more of that in the news recently.
That's right.
And it's an important area to focus on for the long-term well-being of children. Having CYFD involved, I think all of that makes it a new project. But there's also, I mean, there are a lot of other public assistance, public housing type projects through several of the housing authorities around the state. And they're a little bit different. They don't necessarily focus on the intersection between child abuse and homelessness, but they do provide a variety of Section 8 housing, for example, public housing assistance, other stuff. So I think there are good programs, but there's also gaps.
Right.
And the problem is when people fall through those gaps.
That's right.
Where do they end up? And in a situation like this, what was somewhat troubling for me is just seeing that they were in a $1,200 a month 3-bedroom townhouse in a gated community, which are all good things for child safety and all of that. But at the same time, like, what about the long-term ability for them to maintain that when they only have, I think it was like $600 a week in income?
That's right.
It's just not realistic. And so placing people, and I don't know if it's that there was a shortage of availability, or that sometimes the feds have requirements about the size of your family and what kind of unit they can have based on that size. So some of it is, I would be sure, outside of the control of the people here. If it's federal money, it comes with restrictions.
That's right.
And so I think I agree with what Diana's saying. There needs to be some additional funding that goes into it, and maybe that's an area that the state could use some of the surplus that we've seen recently to address.
It's not a bad idea. Jeffrey, pick up on that. The feds kicked in $2.9 million to make this thing get off the ground. We've run through the money now. Does that number give you heartburn as a conservative? Can we spend that as a state on these kind of things?
I don't mind the dollar amount attached to it, any of that. I guess I'm going to approach it from more of a philosophical point of view, and I don't want to sound too esoteric, but Immanuel Kant talked about intention as a philosophy, the categorical imperative. I think the program is well intended, but when you set up an expectation and you take that expectation away,
Right.
those people are going to feel betrayed.
That's right.
And they're going to feel betrayed by any institution they're a part of, whether you call it children, family, youth,
That's right.
whether you call it Appleseed, whether you call it the government, whether you call it us that help fund those types of programs. So it's very important that these types of programs, when you're setting up an expectation, are able to fulfill that expectation, because these people are going to feel rightfully betrayed.
Right.
The other problem I have with it, though, as far as the model, not the idea, is where's the incentive? I'm a pragmatist, I'm an entrepreneur. I think people should be accountable to be incentivized to pay for that mortgage later on. And by the way, there is another program, perhaps we can talk about another time, called Suriname. It's a 2-year program that provides housing. It's not, it's an apartment, but people have to, after those 2 years,
Right.
basically sustain themselves. So just consider that. might
That's
be
interesting. Yeah.
A model.
I think I've heard models like that in other states as well, other cities, I should say. Yeah,
So
interesting.
incentivification and setting up a Flowers for Algernon false expectation, if you ever read that book.
Gotcha. Interesting. I'll have to explore that. Sophie, interestingly, and not surprise anybody, I should think, the statistics are 72% of men who lose their parental rights to a child because of this homelessness issue, and 40-some-odd% of women, this is what happens when they end up losing a child, because they don't have a roof over their heads to be able to provide for that
I
child.
think it's worth noting that many of the people who live in poverty in New Mexico, across the country, are the working poor. They're not, not sitting on their hands. They have jobs. And this takes us back to some of the systemic issues that we see here and across the country in terms of minimum wage, wage theft, the attempts by some businesses to keep their employees below down at part-time instead of enabling them to get benefits through their employers. There is a larger issue.
That's right.
It seems to me that what this program, though, does is it takes a family that has, in many of these cases we hear, or at least some of them we hear, they have been paying for some sort of shelter, but it is not the kind of permanent shelter that we want
That's right.
kids to be in. And so as heartbreaking as it is to think that someone will lose their house after 2 or 3 years, and I really hope there's a way for this program to continue for these families.
Right.
We're talking about people moving from a situation in which they had to move daily, weekly, at a much higher rate.
Right.
And so I think the program represents real progress. The problem, and I think, while I don't 100% agree with everything that's been said at the table, the problem is, when these programs are subject to the vagaries of politics, a politician comes in and says, we're not spending money for any of that stuff, those people really do suffer. I don't think we can expect the private sector or nonprofits to pick that up forever.
That's right.
It's just not how they function.
That's a good point. Laura, there's, as I read it here, we've got to mention Albuquerque Heading Home. They're part of this initiative. They've done great work in our city for this issue for a little bit of time now. But COAFD and Appleseed as well. Again, the idea of having, you mentioned Section 8 housing, there's always resistance to building more Section 8 housing here, even though the Berry administration did get up some buildings, they did some things. What is the main stumbling block in your view? Is it affordable housing for poor people? Is it enough of it? I mean, how does this, in your view, where's the stumbling block here? What's the holdup?
So I just want to make a distinction between Section 8 housing and public housing.
Right.
So public housing is what gets built by a public entity. Here in Albuquerque, we have the Albuquerque Housing Authority,
Right.
which manages and works on building public housing, and that's subsidized housing. Section 8 is actually a voucher program through HUD, where they use privately owned apartments, privately owned homes, and the Section 8 voucher subsidizes the home. So
Gotcha.
it's basically the applicant receives the voucher, and then they go out and find an apartment. Of course, the landlord needs to agree to a contract with the housing authority in order to allow the renter in there. But it uses the private sector, so it uses actual available housing stock. So it isn't using public money to build new homes.
Gotcha.
That would be public housing. And so we have a combination of both of those here in Albuquerque and throughout New Mexico. Well, mostly in the urban areas. The rural areas have a harder time with this.
Right.
But I think, both of those are an important approach. This is an important one because it focuses more on the family.
Right.
I think, and there's additional players involved, like CYFD, in dealing with child abuse and neglect issues. And so I think this is a little bit different. And for a pilot project, project. I think it's been successful. You know, $2.9 million may sound like a lot, but it's really not a lot of
I
money.
agree. That's right.
And so in order to make sure that it continues, it has to have a serious commitment from the state, I think, as well as matching federal dollars. I think, as Diane mentioned, there are foundations out there that that look at funding pilot programs like this as well.
That's right.
So that could be an option that a nonprofit or a government agency could work on. But I think just trying not to let go of the momentum for this. But with that, you need leadership.
That's
and you
right.
have to have
That's
somebody
right.
sort of moving the ball forward.
That's
and so
right.
I hope that the mayor's office and the city officials do actually continue to see this as a priority.
There you go. Check out this story on Searchlight New Mexico. You can find that link to the story on our website, newmexicoinfocus.org. I really encourage it. Now, in just a moment, we'll look at the future of Los Alamos National Labs.